guys ready? Okay. Okay, I'm going to call a meeting to order. Supervisor Gleason is coming in. He'll be here in a minute. So, let me see. Phil, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Stand. Salute. Pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, I am going to ask, even though it is a little bit different than what we have, a report on closed session.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The board met in closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 to discuss one item of anticipated litigation. A report was given to the board. No formal action was taken by the board. That concludes my closed session report.
Okay, thank you. The next thing we're going to have is public comments. Those of you wishing to address items that are not on the agenda may do so at this time. We are asking you to limit your comments to 3 minutes, please. Please come forward. Thank you. Please identify yourself also.
I'm Dr. Don Decker, Chair Breeden and Board of Members. I would like to give you a little report here. It's going to take me about 4 minutes, and if you're willing to hear me through, I will give it to you. I have hard copies that I want read or I want placed into the record. At the last GA board meeting on February 15th, Chairwoman Breeden gave an impassioned plea to approach DWR to give the IWV Basin a special consideration since we are so different. She claimed the basin has 2 million acre-feet of water and storage that we could pump for some period of time until a better solution could be found. As a scientist who has followed and contributed to our understanding of our water supply shortfall issues for many decades, I speak accurately to her request. The 2 million acre-feet she quotes is incomplete. The quantity of recoverable potable water and storage in the IWV Basin was an estimate made by Dutcher and Moyle in 1973. And the the copy I'll give you has a link you can click on their paper. The quantity was based on 1920 levels as a starting point and a 200-foot permissible drop in water levels as an endpoint. A lower value, 1.8 million acre-feet, was obtained by the Bureau of Reclamation study in 1993 as a result of a better understanding of the non-potable water areas in the basin. But we are not in 1920, and we're not in 1973 either. How much water have we pumped from the IWV Basin over the years? Adding up the published pumping since 1950 results in a total of approximately 1.2 million acre-feet. We have thus extracted about 2/3 of our available stored potable water and no longer have anything like 2 million or even 1.8 million acre-feet to work with. Furthermore, the present and extrapolated future extraction rates are 3 or 4 times the 1973 rates, and this increased extraction will deplete the remaining stored water much faster than in the previous 60 years of pumping. These calculations also do not consider the further reduction in quantity of useful stored water from degradation from poor water intrusion as the depletion proceeds. These considerations form the basis for a sense of urgency to address our water supply shortfall. Simply pumping more water from storage, as Ms. Breeden has suggested, is nothing less than continuing the long-standing abuse of our groundwater supply. Ms. Breeden's suggestion is in no way justifiable either to the state or the citizens of this valley. I have just 2 more short paragraphs.
Can we make it quickly, please? Thank you.
I have not intended to pick on Ms. Breeden, but she is the front row representative for folks in our community who simply cannot believe we are in such a difficult circumstance. Denial is a very powerful emotion, but provides absolutely no guidance in attempting to solve Mother Nature's challenges. As a starting point, a clear understanding of the problem at hand is essential. Our supply shortfall is so serious that there is no possibility of continuing our present valley economy and lifestyles without imported water. Our groundwater supply shortfall is not a new realization at all. The first serious attempt to identify and bring an imported supply into this valley and vicinity was made in 1919 by a group of investors who constructed and put forth a very competent proposal for 180,000 acre-feet per year of water from Mono Basin. I suspect that there are not very many people who actually realize that happened. The proposal was very similar to the 1908 successful proposal from LADWP for Owens Valley water. The IWV proposal died quickly as a result of DWP political strength. It will require a lot more concentrated effort than has been heretofore expended on the part of all of us to succeed under our present circumstances. Getting beyond denial is a critical first step.
Thank you, Don. I do want to add one thing. I use the Water District's 50-year supply figure. So, okay, thank you. On that, is there any other public comment?
Good morning, Board. Mike Neal. Something I believe I brought up before, but like to emphasize here briefly, and that is the fact that in the near-term future, the only people who are actually have a serious water problem are those rural well owners, private well owners, who are having a very small waterhead above their pump. Everybody else, we have, we're supplied by the Water District. They have deep water wells, and yet we're proceeding forward here under the arbitrary state mandate, like, we have to get all this in place within the next few years. Now, in light of the fact that this proposed $50 per acre feet coming out to $22 a head per person per year, and the fact that if you just simply do a little simple math and look at the lowest possible imported water cost, which does not include anything except the cost of water itself at around $1,000 an acre feet, you can say, well, okay, once we start importing water, that's going to cost us 20 times $22 per year. So it's going to be a lot of money. And that's not going to be all it is. And that's just a simple estimate, but that's based on numbers provided up to this date. So my suggestion is, instead of talking about let us put off the plan, go to talk to DWR and say, let us consider a good neighbor tax to help the people with what wells that are about to become non-functional in this valley. I believe you could probably easily get the people in this valley to go along with that, to help their friends and neighbors around here. It wouldn't be a lot to help those, who knows how many, we don't know, but we can find out. And then say, and give it, and let us not be shoved into a short time frame to, quote unquote, get our aquifer sustainable, quote unquote, and be forced into, importing water in the short term just for this arbitrary goal, mindless state mandate of everybody has to have a aquifer that stays level. So please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment? Okay, the next item on the agenda is a consent calendar. We do not have a financial report to hand out. So if you would, we'll take a motion. Are you coming up to speak? We are pulling the financial item from the consent calendar. We do not have a report on that for the consent calendar. That's what I'm saying. We are not. It is not on there.
He wants to pull item 7B.
Okay, you want to address item 7B? Okay. All right, let me first get a motion and a second, and then we'll take comment. Motion to approve without item D. Would someone make a motion to approve the consent calendar without item D, and then a second, and then we will talk about in public comment on item B?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay, is there comment on public, is there council authority comment on item 7A, B, and C? Okay. We have the motion, we had some public comment. All right, if you want to come up and make your public comment.
We're just pulling it.
We're not pulling it. We're approving items A, B, and C. We have a motion, and then we are going to, there was no...
Madam Chair, my understanding was the motion was items 7A and C, leaving B because it was pulled, but I may have misinterpreted. I'd have to defer to the maker of that motion.
Okay, then if those of you who made the motion, please tell me what you were making the motion on.
Exactly what your legal counsel just said.
All right, please. All right, then, approval of items A and C for the consent calendar. I'm sorry to hold you off.
So are you looking for a motion to approve the consent calendar with minus B? That's all you're looking for?
And D.
And E?
No, we don't have an item E.
I thought you said and E.
D, like a dog.
Oh,
'Cause-
okay. I'll make that motion.
Okay.
This
We
is
already
a different
have the motion.
Yeah, I think this was the motion that was made, but
Yeah.
I misunderstood
to
the
approve
motion.
consent calendar itself.
minus with item 7B pulled.
Okay. Then that's already been made.
And item 7D absent.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I can amend my motion then and also item 7D.
Okay, all those in favor?
You need a second.
Second, and I'm in favor.
Aye.
Okay, thank
Hey,
you.
Bob. Bob,
Any
okay,
opposed?
Bob's there.
Thank you, Bob, for speaking up. We were wondering if you were hearing us okay.
I am, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now, you wanted to address item B.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. For the record, Derek Hoffman, legal counsel for Meadowbrook. And yes, thank you. With respect to item 7B, the proposed resolution adopting a TAC membership composition, if I can call it that. Two comments. The first is the spelling for Mr. Teasdale. His name is E-D-D-Y. That Eddie is E-D-D-Y. I would ask that Eddie Teasdale's name be corrected, please. And then second, and I guess a little more substantively, I just have some questions, I think, and I think the public would benefit from hearing some of the context as to these changes. The board has carried a number of resolutions in the past changing or amending the TAC composition, and so I'm curious why these issues or items have come about just now. It would be helpful to hear the context for that. The resolution was placed into the agenda packet just late yesterday. It's been presented as part of the consent calendar, but I think there's some question as to the context for the changes. And then secondly, it's not clear to me regarding the limitations that are mentioned on the Navy's participation. The memorandum, the staff memo, and the resolution itself mention unique circumstances or unique limitations on the Navy's ability to participate or comment at the TAC. And I think it would be helpful, particularly for the TAC, to get a better understanding of what those noted limitations are. If for no other reason that the TAC can more effectively operate and have clarity as to what that role is, or if this resolution has changed that in some regard. So my request would be that either the board today offer those clarifications, or if not today, that perhaps Mr. Johnson might come to the next TAC meeting and clarify that the impact of this resolution with regard to the Navy's participation. I hope I've made that clear. Thank you for considering that.
Staff, can you give us some direction, please?
I should. Since I were being recorded. So, first, let's address the first. Why is this coming up now? It came up now for a couple reasons. We have the one member of the TAC, and
Phil,
I won't.
would you identify yourself, please?
Sure. My name's Phil Hall, County Counsel, also one of the authorities councils, Deputy County Counsel, I should say. So, the reason it came up very shortly. Part of it came up because we recognized at staff level, which we didn't know, but I guess members of the TAC knew that we've had somebody on the TAC who was unable to attend multiple meetings. In fact, I don't believe he's attended a single meeting since he was appointed in November for excusable reasons that I don't think we should get into at a public meeting. So we wanted to address that. We've also got Form 700s coming up due this month, and we've got two issues there with A, the water agency doesn't need to file a Form 700 given their limited status, and B, there is there's an exception in the Form 700s for the Navy, for any federal agency, so we wanted to address that. And then part of it also was just to clean up a formatting issue. The resolutions before followed the formatting of the PAC, and that was because the PAC membership appoints to the TAC. So it was following that format. And there were some typographical errors in there about whether or not a star was in the right spot. So that's all it was fixing. Typographical error there, taking care of the 700s, and taking care of this one position, which we've moved into a stayed position. The idea there is that when and if he's able to come back, he can come back without really any further formal board action to allow the TAC to meet more quickly and completely. As for the Navy, these are Navy rules and regulations that require this. The Navy is not, and I don't know how I'll let Commander Longbottom add to it, but as they've said in public meetings before, going back to when we first formed the JPA, the Navy is not allowed to take formal stances on anything that we're doing. They can provide comment, but they're not able to provide any formal stances, and that's what we're trying to address there. Both the change with the agency and the Navy have been approved by them.
Okay. Does that answer your question? Okay. Is there any other public comment on that item? Phil, if you want to wait, maybe you can address those.
Yes, I'm Wes Katzenstein. I'm a member of the PAC and represent the domestic well owners. And had a little bit of concern. I noticed in the whereas section of this resolution, the last statement under whereas A says, in the course of evaluating each draft technical element of the GSP, the TAC shall strive for consensus in preparing written recommendations to the Water Resources Manager. I'm not quite sure why that sentence even needs to be included, and I'm assuming that there will still be the opportunity for minority opinions on the topics that are addressed by the TAC, and this would almost seem to imply that there may be some threat to the minority opinion that needs to be able to come forward as well. So I'm questioning why that last sentence even has to be on whereas section A. And the second question I have is the members of the TAC were appointed by the PAC. And, for example, the domestic well owners decided we only needed one representative because this is a technical forum and there may not be any benefit to us to having more than one member on the TAC. However, if this consensus idea holds and it limits the opportunity for dissenting views or minority opinions, it may be more appropriate for the domestic well owners and perhaps also those representing the users of a commercial water entity like Mr. Panzer. Perhaps it may make sense for each of us to have the two members, the PAC to appoint two members to the TAC for each of those PAC members. So if it is indeed a consensus we're looking for and not a technical reality, we may want to reconsider. I guess my question is, as a PAC member, do we still have the opportunity to appoint a second TAC member since we have two domestic well owner PAC members? Let me summarize my question to that. Thank you.
Mr. Hall?
Mr. Hall, again. the first question of the whereas, this is really just copying language from the bylaws. The bylaws have us having a consensus to the water resource manager. Minority reports come to this board. Obviously, inside the TAC, if somebody is not reaching consensus, the water resource manager is there to hear that. So the minority report aspect comes to the board. This doesn't change the bylaws in any way. This was just put in there to kind of give the TAC resolution a little bit of flavor of what the TAC does. This in no way will change the bylaws.
Does that answer your question, sir? Thank you. Okay, is there any other public comment? Is there any other council or board comment?
I do.
Sir.
I'd like to, I got a call from an interested party who would like to become a member of the TAC and represent small ag. So I'd like to have a membership review of the, if I could refer to staff to please review TAC membership, and I'll let you know who that is to fill that small ag position. Thank you.
Go ahead.
The way I view this this resolution that you want us to adopt was just as pretty much a housekeeping item. I didn't see anything really major about it. So I'm not. I guess we answered the questions, but it was just kind of to take care of some details. So that was the intent. So if that makes it simpler, maybe not. I don't know.
Commander,
Mr. Hoffman, this doesn't change the Navy's role whatsoever. Our role is exactly the way it was before. The only thing it does is clarify the fact that we are not required to file a Form 700.
okay. Any others?
Madam Chair, I just request a roll call vote on this, please.
Oh, it has to be. It's a resolution.
Yeah.
Did anybody make a motion?
We don't have a motion yet.
I'll make a motion.
All right.
I make a motion that we approve the resolution as it's written.
Second.
Okay, we're going to do a roll call vote. Rika, where are you? Lauren. Sorry, Lauren.
Chair Breeden, this is Bob.
Bob.
Yeah, I had a question about Peter's motion. Mr. Hoffman mentioned that one of the names in the resolution, and Peter just motioned to approve the resolution as drafted. Want to correct that spelling as part of the motion?
Yeah. Okay, I'll modify my motion to accept the misspelled name. Or any other misspellings that might be in there.
Second.
Okay. Now, thank you, Bob.
Director Harrington,
Aye.
Director Gleason,
Aye.
Chairwoman Breeden,
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown,
Aye.
Director Page.
Aye.
So the motion is approved. All right.
Madam
next.
Chair, one cleanup item. I didn't understand that Director Page was participating telephonically, so if we could go back and revisit 7A and 7C and have a roll call vote on those items from the consent calendar as required by the Brown Act. I dropped the ball on that. I didn't realize he was a board member at the time. So if we could get a motion on 7A and 7Z and request 7C and request a roll call vote, that would clean up the deficiency that we currently have.
Because he's absent.
So moved.
Second.
Director Harrington,
Aye.
Director Gleason,
Yes.
Chairwoman Breeden,
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown,
Aye.
Director Page.
Aye.
Okay, we are going to move one item. Item 10 is going to be after item 8, and after 10, we will do item 9. That is because we have a person who has to leave at noon. So we will then now go to the Water Resource Manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. It's on? This is on, right? Okay, we're on. Hi, Steve Johnson, your Water Resources Manager, Stetson Engineers. Like I always like to say, it's good to be here. It's good to see all of you again. Getting up here more and more often, but it is good to see everybody. Good turnout again, so that's great. I've got Jeff Helsley. You folks know Jeff out of my office. He's actually our engineering manager. He's going to do a short presentation on the poem. I'll let you know in general, we're working hard. We've got a lot of things on the table right now. We've got a lot of balls in the air that we're working on. I'm going to go over those after Jeff's presentation on a couple of items. I'm going to go over some of the things we covered at the TAC. A lot of you were at the TAC, so I'm not going to go to a lot of detail. There were presentations, PowerPoints provided at the TAC. If anybody needs those, let us know, because we didn't want to take the time to try to do all that here today. It took a long time to get through those at the TAC, but we are covering a lot of things. On the poem, Jeff's going to give you an update on the poem. I want to take the opportunity before he does this to thank Commander Longbottom for all the efforts and all the work he's doing to try to get us coordinated with our schedule and the poem and our schedule with the Navy funding for DRI and our modeling. We are working very hard with Commander Longbottom and with DRI to move those items forward. You'll see on the poem where it is and what we're trying to do, but I know, because I've been working with Commander Longbottom, I know he's putting together putting a lot of time and effort into trying to get this done. I will let you know. I might as well do it now rather than the end. Some of the modeling work that we're doing and going to be doing is getting very quickly on our critical path, where they're getting more and more important that we get tracking on our schedule. With the arrangement that we have using the DRI model and support from the Navy to fund the DRI work, there very well may be, it's not right now, I'm not ready to go there right now, but we did talk about it with legal counsel going forward. There very well may be a need for the authority and or Stetson to work with the Navy to try and get some of the funding that's needed, upfront funding that's needed to keep DRI working on their schedule going forward. I think we're good right now, so there's no panic right now, but I just wanted to let you folks know that may be coming. We do have some money set aside, cash money set aside in the Prop 1 funding grant for the modeling work. It wasn't necessarily for us, so it can be used to fund DRI's work going forward if we need to. So we'll be working on that. Right now, our goal is to get the DRI work that we've all talked about. I think the folks at the TAC know that we've got 3, we won't call them upgrades, modifications or upgrades to the model that they've agreed to do. The Navy's agreed to fund those. Our goal right now is to get those going, get those on track. Once those are going on track, we're going to identify some of the other work that needs to be done, get quotations from DRI on that work, coordinate with Commander Longbottom, and figure out the best way to get them funded so they can stay on schedule. So I want to let folks know that right up front. Yes, sir.
Madam Chairman, Chairwoman, may
please.
Okay, sorry. Yes, I wanted to just add on to that. So we are definitely moving forward on the 3 items, and we are on track for the POAM here. So it's under contract, and we're working with DRI to get those done. So we will meet the POAM requirement that you have on this revised POAM. And one of the things Steve and I are talking about is how best can we get the bureaucracy out of the need to move efficiently. And so one of the things that we're working on is to try to establish a direct contractual relationship between the GSA and DRI so that you can readily use your grant funding to have DRI run models and scenarios at a moment's notice. That's what we're trying to do, try to be more efficient.
Right. And just a further qualification or clarification, these will not be changes to the model. It's very important that the model structurally does not change. We don't intend to do that. These are just upgrades and add-ons, and some of the model runs we need to do, some of the workshops we need to do, things like that, DRI will need to be funded. So any work that we would recommend for front-loading the funding, working with the Navy, the scope of that work would have to go through the Navy first.
Right. We would maintain integrity of the model.
Right.
But what we're trying to do is allow the GSA, the TAC, and the team to use the model freely.
Right. Okay.
Well, not freely. You have to work with DRI on that one.
Freely. So
that was good.
So continuing, Madam Chairman, to continue with my report. Jeff is going to present the poem. I know we're on a schedule, and I know we have a big item after this. This will probably take a little time, so we'll try to go as fast as we can. Jeff, I'm going to have Jeff do the poem. A second item is the Prop 1 grant funding. Jeff was in Sacramento Tuesday?
Monday.
Monday. Jeff was in Sacramento Monday, meeting with DWR folks on other things, but it included the Sigma folks. He has an update on where we're going, what that schedule looks like. So he's going to do A and B, and then I'll try to briefly go through the other two, and then I have a little bit more beyond that of what we've been doing at the TAC. So go ahead, Jeff. Thanks.
All right, go ahead.
Morning, Chair Braden, members of the board. I'm Jeff Helsley with Stetson Engineers, as Steve said, and we have an updated POAM. It's a continually evolving document. There are copies out near the sign-in sheet, and we've got it up here. I'm going to skip to the critical path near the bottom of this page that's projected right now, and you'll see, the first red bar is behind us. That was an evaluation of the DRI model as it existed for the Navy's purposes, and we had Jean Moran, our hydrogeologist and modeler, look at that. She identified the changes that were needed in the model so that it would be more useful for the preparation of a groundwater sustainability plan. There are some guidelines from DWR on what's looked for in there. That's the work that Commander Longbottom and Steve were talking about that DRI is getting ready to undertake. So that's the first red bar. And you'll notice on this page there's a gap between the red bars there. That's where we're at right now, is in that gap in our schedule. And the critical path item shows up on the next page, and it's the recycled water study and the imported water study. We had a meeting, last month's meeting of the TAC. We introduced what sources of water we were looking at and the approach we were going to take to evaluate those and look at the potential, hopefully expanded uses of recycled water and potential options for imported water. And that's on the critical path at the moment. And that's important because we need to have a certain amount of that work done when we come back to the TAC to talk about the management actions, the actions that we want to model to try and bring the basin into sustainability. At the moment, we're showing the DRI work starting on April 1st, and that's the second from the top red line there. That's DRI's modification of the model to get it recalibrated to the water levels so that it'll be ready to run what's called the baseline runs. And during that process, we're going to have a workshop with the TAC on the calibration of the model. DRI is going to do some work. They're going to come to the TAC and show them what's happening with the calibration, finalize the calibration, and then from there, if we could go to the next page. Thank you. The top couple of red bars there are when they start doing the modeling for the baseline, and that's essentially saying if the conditions stay the way they are today, we're going to model out until the year 2070 and see what the basin would look like. And that's our baseline. When we start looking at management actions, we're going to compare what changes because of our management actions that we model compared to that baseline. What are the changes in water levels, the changes in water quality, and potentially subsidence, and the other effects that we need to look at, changes in storage and water levels. So that process will be taking place starting in August and going through November. And once we get the baseline in place, those next two, kind of in the middle there, red lines, critical path items are starting to actually, there'll be discussions, as I mentioned, of the management actions once we're in agreement on what combination of actions we want to look at in the model. They'll start doing the modeling to see what those impacts are on water levels in the basin and compare it to our baseline. So that's the critical work we have really for the rest of this year and into the first quarter of next year. And when we get to that point, we'll have some idea of what options might be effective in bringing the basin into sustainability. After that, we'll start talking about how to implement that. And I'll stop my presentation there and take any questions.
Any questions from,
I just have one. What is rolled up critical path? I mean, rolled up critical task? What is that referring to? I mean, or what does it mean? It's in your nomenclature here. What, you know?
Oh, there's
the line colors.
Yeah, we do have the ability. This one's broken down to a certain level of detail.
Yeah, this is pretty detailed.
Yeah, this is a detailed one, and we can roll that up.
So you're collapsing.
Yeah, we
understood.
Yeah,
I got it.
Yeah. Commander Longbottom likes this version.
I understand. I just needed I'm looking at it and I just couldn't make sense, and now I understand.
Yeah, we have not rolled up any of the detail.
You have 3 pages here.
Yeah, and looking at it this morning, I think I could add another page to it easily.
okay, any others? Any from public? Okay, thank you, sir.
I was also going to address the next item.
Please.
The status of the Prop 1 application. I think everybody's aware the Rhine Water Authority submitted an application with considerable input, and the preliminary awards were announced at the beginning of February, and the preliminary recommendation was that this grant be fully funded. There was a public comment period that ended at the end of February. Surprisingly, at least as of yesterday morning, DWR hadn't posted any public comments, which is a little unusual. And we haven't heard that there would be any comment on this particular grant application, but they haven't posted what comments they got on any other applications. I was meeting with DWR on Monday, as Steve mentioned, and I asked them about the grants in general, and they said that the intent is to have the final recommendations out by the end of this month. So that will be a done deal then. Then all we have to do is get a contract together with them. They have a template that they've made available that I think the attorneys have started looking at, and we've started looking at. They'd said at one point that they intended to have those contracts executed within a month of the final award if they can. That's an extremely fast schedule for them. I've never seen them do one of those agreements in that time, but this is a very fast process for Sigma. So that's the update I have. Is hopefully we'll be hearing the final recommendations soon.
Yeah, if I might, Madam Chairman, just to add to that, just as a heads up, that would mean if things go on according to that schedule, that would mean we would probably be coming back, unless we did a special board meeting, coming back to this board at the May meeting, possibly with a contract to execute for the Prop 1 grant. Is that right, Jeff? March, April, then the May meeting, if everything goes well. So I want to make you aware of that going forward, and we'll be working on that with the agenda. Also, I've been looking at the template that they've had. This came right from Sigma, right from DWR, so it should be pretty close to what we're going to be looking at. One of the things I've done is gone through and itemized out the administrative support that's going to be needed just to manage this agreement, because progress reports have to be prepared, invoices have to be prepared. There's quite a bit of work that needs to be done, so we're breaking that out, and then we're going to be working with the group, the general managers and such, as to who should be doing that work, because it's certainly not part of our Prop 1 grant application. It's going to be support work, and we want to use as much of local work as we can and try to keep the cost down as much as we can. But I've already gone through and laid out the work requirement that's at least in the template to support that agreement through the end. In addition, there's another item, but I provided this information. I know we provided it to legal counsel, and I think the GMs also got this information. And Jeff might be able to add something on this. There is a provision in the template agreement that allows the grant applicant or the grant receiver allows us to make application for up to 50% front loading of the funding for the DAC money, for the disadvantaged community money. Our DAC application, $650,000 roughly $650,000. So based upon cash flows and things like that, I mean, there is a whole separate application process and a whole separate management process. Everything you do with the state comes with a lot of red tape where you have to manage it. But it's something we don't need to do it now. We don't have an agreement yet, but it's something we'll be looking at and working with, I know, Alan on the cash flow and where we're at to whether or not it makes sense to try to get maybe some upfront money from the state, at least for the DAC for the DAC side of that, to put more money in your bank accounts as early as possible. And then we would expend it, and obviously we'd have to document all that. Did anything else on that, Jeff?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Should I keep going?
Yes,
Because I've got
please.
a couple more.
Please,
couple items
need
and I
two
know you're in a
more.
hurry.
Yes, sir.
Okay. A few other things that I want to just inform the board and the audience about what we're doing, what's going on. One very important thing, I wanted to thank Don Sadiba and Wade Major. I wanted the folks here know that we've had our first, and Don has set it up with Wade, we had our first coordination meeting between the work we're doing on the modeling and the database work we've been talking about over the last couple of months, along with the Brackish group, including the Rambo folks. I thought we had a conference call. It was probably about an hour. It was very, very productive conference call. I am seeing right from the get-go that there's a lot of ways to coordinate the work we're doing to the benefit of the authority so that you get the very best product. And I want to let you folks know that the people we're working with, the people that Don's bringing to the table, everything seems to be working fine. They're asking for things that we may be able to provide for them, and at the same time, they're offering whatever they have to us. So things are moving forward. We've had our first one. Wade prepared some minutes from that meeting, which we've looked at. Everything looks good. So we have a procedure set up for following it up, and that's going to go forward. So I want to make sure the board is aware of that. I know there was a discussion about all that, but everything's lining up good, and Don and I are kumbaya. We're all working together good. It's all good. So I want to let you folks know that.
Go ahead.
Thank you. How much does that cost us?
The call?
All that work.
Oh.
What I'm concerned about, Steve, let me see what I'm concerned about. I'm glad that's all happening.
Yeah.
However, I'm concerned that is ratcheting up our costs.
Right.
And I know you're doing the best you can to ratchet them down in the right direction.
Yes.
But I think we need some type of cost controls put in place so that we, instead of trying just to make everybody happy, we're trying to really manage the problem as efficiently as we can. So how do we go about understanding what costs are associated with, this? Are we talking about the DMS systems?
DMS and modeling.
Okay, so what? I thought we had a conversation where we have a DMS system.
Yes.
And it's yours.
Yes.
And then the other one we're trying to look at as a redundant or as a backup or as a secondary system. And that's fine and dandy, but why should that cost us any money?
Right. Let me answer it the best I can. I want to get clarification of your question. I don't know exactly what the past cost is, the cost it was to go through all this, because we did prepare a staff memo. We had a lot of discussions, some issues around getting to where we are today, and I can get those for you to see what that cost. But the bigger answer I think you want to know is going forward, and we're not anticipating any extra cost for us going forward. That should all fit into the work, since we have our path and we know where we're going, and working with the Brackish Water Group and sharing information is all a part of that work. We would have been doing that anyway. So now that we're on the path that we wanted to be on, we had a short diversion where we spent some time getting there, but we're on the path we had planned to be on before. It's all included in what we're doing for you. So you won't see any new costs regarding coordination with the Brackish Water Study or Rambold or the DMS or the model.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I know you're doing your best. And I'm not suggesting anything other than that.
Yes.
But I would like to recommend to our general manager and our staff to develop some type of, I think this is just one instance of several that could come up as we march through this whole process of the year, so that we have some insight and the public has some insight into any costs that are incurred and how we best managing those costs that may be lying on the periphery. So some type of cost control modeling that we can just watch and monitor all our expenses. Yep. And can we develop that? Can I make that referral to staff and have you look at that? Thank you.
I guess I have a question based on your recommendation is, how do we determine what costs would have been or could have been? Because it doesn't matter what they were till today, because they are done. But how you develop the future is my bigger concern. Is that what you were asking? Okay, I just wanted to verify. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I had one as well, if you don't mind.
Please.
So one of the questions I have is, and this is going to segue into just something I want to make sure everyone is aware of. how does the information flow? Because one of the things that concerns me is there are a lot of great efforts going on in some of these other groups, but I don't see how the information that's occurring there is getting tied in and funneled through this organization substructure, like the TAC, for instance. And so one of the things I would really like to see is some kind of linkage between some of these other projects that are going on and some coordination with our TAC here for this board so that we can get, what's going on out into the public's eyes. And I'll segue that into making sure everybody understands this, but the Navy has pulled itself out of the brackish water management team as well as the cooperative groundwater management team. And it's not because of a personality conflict or anything like that. Those are great groups. They were groups that started before the GSA was ever in place, and they've done absolutely remarkable things. Unfortunately, there's only so many people in the Navy, and there's only so many man-hours, so to speak, and we are only able to vest ourselves within the GSA construct. And so I wanted to make sure everyone understood that the Navy is committed to the GSA organization, and so the GSA is the legal authority for managing groundwater in this basin, and as such, that is where the Navy is committed. And so we'll sit on this board, we will participate in the TAC, and we will participate in the PAC. And I'm hopeful that we as an organization can somehow come up with a linkage with some of these other groups that are doing things to get their information funneled into our TAC so that we maintain full visibility and we can help each other out and support each other. I think that's what I had to say.
Thank you,
I don't know if there's any questions related to that.
I have one. Does the ability to pull yourself out does not diminish your respect for what's being done? It just is a time frame. Now I'm asking if we can find a way to bring that support to the TAC and the PAC through the brackish water and salt nutrient and all those other studies that are being done. Can they somehow come into this? Do they need to? How do we, as you said, flow the information? Is there a process available to do that?
And I think that's what I'm getting at. Like I said, and these are great organizations. The brackish I've been part of since I've been here almost 4 years ago. That group's done remarkable things. But the GSA didn't exist when they were doing remarkable things. And they're still doing remarkable things. And I think this is a team effort, right? We're all trying to get to one end. And I think there's just a great opportunity to formally get these groups together so that the resources are being shared more efficiently. The other thing that kind of has got me to this position is, there's a lot of things going on in the brackish water group, or, the SkyTem, for instance, and there's a lot of data that's coming out of that could potentially be very useful to the groundwater model. But the Navy is dedicated to the GSA, and so we have basically dedicated our groundwater model to the GSA and the GSP. And so I can't, in good conscience, take data from this group that's outside of the GSA and bring it into the model and update the model to try to make the model better without some kind of concurrence from this organization. So again, we're dedicated to the GSA. There's a lot of good data out there in these groups, and I think if we can get this linkage flowing, then a lot of the requests for data that they have of the Navy, we can get it to them, and a lot of the data that they're collecting via SkyTem, Stanford studies, et cetera, can be formally brought into the TAC, vetted by the TAC, a recommendation brought in from the TAC to the board for us to go take action on it. I find myself in an interesting place because I'm being asked to do things from two different groups.
Welcome to my nightmare. Hey, can I comment on that?
Please.
Thank you very much, Commander. I appreciate it. I completely understand your perspective, and I respect the Navy's perspective, and we sincerely appreciate your full cooperation in the GSA and solving the problems that we got here. We understand that your decisions don't reflect your commitment to our success, and we're very thankful we have it. I have the same concern, though, seriously, about that. And I'd like to have a review of all county memberships in all organization groundwater, just to make sure that we're demonstrating a commitment to this organization, which is what I want to make sure that this board understands that we are fully committed to the same extent you are in our organization. I also believe the answer to your question lies in our JPA, which we all agreed to and have signed up, and that puts the leadership role squarely on the back of the water resource manager to steer and to manage information in the way that's best going to serve his goals and our goals to efficiently get to our modeling. So I think we are all on the board understanding that you are the person, the water resource manager, that tasks the TAC and tasks the PAC and gives them a direction or questions that you need answers to, and you are the one who starts the movement of the information and into that organization and out of that organization. So I think I'm quoting the JPA correctly. That was my understanding of it. I'd be interested in your thoughts, Steve, about that.
Sure, if I may, Madam.
Please.
Sure. Commander Longbottom's comments and yours too, Supervisor Gleason. There's a couple parts to the answer. I think the most important part is that we are scheduling presentations by the Brackish Water Group, USGS, to bring those to the TAC, and we will be there. We'll be participating in those presentations. So we're going to be keeping track of what they're doing, and they're going to make presentations to the TAC. So representation will be there. As things move forward, and we're going to use a certain amount of judgment with this, but certainly the important things that come out of those groups will be brought back to the board. If it's routine coordination, we will get it done. We actually had a conversation about exactly what Commander Longbottom mentioned, which was consistency of the models, upgrades to models, things that may or may not be done, and how we're going to coordinate that effort between us and the Ramble folks, the folks that are going to be working on whatever modeling they're doing. And in fact, they're asking for information on some of the structure of the DRI model to make sure when they start creating the model layers and such, that they create the model layers consistent with the DRI model. That was one of the things that we pointed out during the discussion it's very important that we make the models consistent. And if they come across anything during the call, we emphasized if they come across anything in constructing a model that we will be using for this basin that is in any way inconsistent with what we already know about the DRI model, we need to stop and make sure we're in agreement of what we do or don't do, bring the Navy in and make sure we understand that. And the answer we generally got was, at this time, there's no intention to change anything structurally with the DRI model. So there's coordination going on right now. Most of it will go through the TAC because there will be presentations. They're being scheduled right now, and I'll bring those back. And we also have, as part of because we knew these studies were going on when we put together the budget for Prop 1, we actually budgeted some separate time for us to coordinate those activities and get up to speed and make sure we were following those studies and incorporate those appropriately into the GSP. So a lot of this has been planned out, and a lot of it is going forward right now and being scheduled for exactly what you're asking for.
Ron, did I see you were trying to speak?
Okay.
No? Okay. Anybody else? Any other comments?
I'll try to wrap this up as quick as I can with the other items.
We've already touched on the groundwater modeling. I think everybody's up to speed on where we're at with the modeling and the schedule and such. We are talking about, and I mentioned the funding component, which we're going to be dealing with. We are talking about having workshops with DRI there on the basin model in June or July. Ad hoc committee, you guys are aware of that. I think Adam may report a little bit on that during his TAC report. We didn't provide any assignments going forward to the TAC related to the modeling going forward. For the data management system, we've already talked a lot about the data management system, but I wanted folks to know we did provide access to the data management system to the general managers and legal counsel and a couple of the board members. We had an outstanding question, which I will follow up on. I don't need an answer today. I will follow up on, because the question was asked, I think, at a prior board meeting for public access to that data management system. And we've gotten it to a point now where we've made sure that only publicly available data and information is now on that data management system. So that if we do make it available to the public, there's no concerns about privacy or things that maybe the Navy or private pumpers or somebody don't want to have on on the database. So I'll be following up with the appropriate folks to give us authorization to release access to the data management system through the PAC and the TAC. So that'll be coming up. I already mentioned this is what I was going to talk about, coordination with the Brackish Water Group. We've already done that. At the TAC meeting, this is kind of off of the agenda, but I just wanted to cover it really quickly here. At the TAC meeting, we provided our first presentations on a bit of work that we've done organizing and understanding the recycled water system in this basin, and provided a presentation on that, and also on, alternative water supplies and imported water. So this was our first shot at organizing really just opportunities that we see that are out there for both recycled water and for imported water or alternative water supplies, to get it out there. The whole goal here was to get it in front of the TAC group and get feedback primarily on completeness, to make sure that there aren't things out there that we're missing. We tried to organize in a format to put everything that we know about recycled water and everything we know about alternative water supplies, which includes conservation, it includes stormwater capture as alternative water. Everything that we know about trying to gather more water for this basin, we put under alternative water and imported water, and then recycled water is a separate study because recycled water is so important. I will let you know at the TAC meeting, we got a lot of very, very good input, a lot of things that we didn't know, and further explanation and more detail about things we did know, but things that we needed to go further, so we got that information. Our steps going forward on both the recycled water and the alternative water, imported water presentations will be to get information back from the TAC and then start organizing them more in a priority as to where we should be going next. Recycled water projects, what projects conceptually from a feasibility standpoint, what projects make sense, and try to prioritize those. What are they going to cost to implement, and try to gather those costs together and bring those back to the TAC, because those will be projects that may be a part of the GSP when it's prepared. I think we had a general consensus at the TAC that, and this is not just your basin. This is statewide, certainly all of Southern California. Recycled water use needs to be developed and implemented to the maximum extent you can. I mean, it's water that you have. It's local water. You're not importing it. You're not hurting another area. You're not having conflicts, the political conflicts. So one of the goals is, and our goals in this work is to make sure that recycled water, whatever we can use it for, we maximize it, whether it's in lieu for irrigation or for groundwater recharge, for indirect use, non-potable but indirect use, other uses. We need to make sure we're maximizing that, because it's real hard to go out to somebody else and ask them to send water to you when you haven't exercised all the water that you have locally. So we're making that effort first of all. And the alternative water, we're looking at a lot of different places to go. And again, if anybody does not have those, the PowerPoints, the presentations that were given at the TAC, just let me know, let us know, we'll send them to you, because a lot of detail was provided. But we looked at, for the imported water, we looked at all the different sources that we think are out there, so we want input on that. We looked at, obviously, conveyance, and there's certain conveyance we're all aware of between the DWP Aqueduct and State Water Project, what the conveyances are. We looked at different in lieu exchange programs that we're aware of, and we even provided some cost on other projects that we're aware of, not directly to this basin, but they at least give you an order of magnitude of what alternative water, imported water, what these things are going to cost. And we looked at stormwater. We got a lot of input on the imported water and alternative water supplies, which I thought was very interesting, including banning evaporative coolers and things like that, which was clearly a little bit beyond where we were looking right now, but when you stop and think about it, it all makes sense. We've got to go there. We've got to go there with all this information, and I think the Water District is going to be very helpful on implementing whatever local conservation efforts we might be looking at. So the last item, and I think I'm done, is reporting on the unmetered production. And I just want to let you know at the TAC, Legal counsel Jim Worth did provide an email that provided some guidance on 3 different methods to quantify unmetered production in the basin, which was fine. because we frankly wanted more information. We added to that. I provided to Adam, and we sent out a questionnaire to the TAC members asking for even more information. We should be getting responses back certainly by the next TAC meeting, which is in a couple weeks. We asked for it 7 days in advance so that we could actually respond to it at the TAC meeting, so we should be getting that. So that lets you know where we're at on that work. Associated with the next item, which is the assessment work, it looks like we may be moving out in front of the TAC, and I want the TAC folks here to know that too. We might be working out in front of the TAC a little bit and providing some guidance to the work we're doing on the assessment work on how we, Stetson, or the Water Resources Manager, will be at least starting out with some recommendations on how we might quantify these unmetered wells, how we might be doing that, because we're going to need it before the TAC meeting. The TAC meeting is on the same day as the next topic we're going to be talking about. So we will be working ahead of the TAC a little bit, but I want to let the folks at the TAC know we still want that input. We still want what you need to say. We can always modify it. We can always do what we need to do going forward. We do want the input, but we'll be addressing the next item on unmetered production too. So, and we're working on that. So that's all I have. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Any questions from the public? Okay, then we will go in. As I said earlier, we are skipping item 8 for right now. We're moving 10 up next.
We need a vote, right?
Pardon me?
We need a vote on the water resource management.
Are we just accepting your report?
Yeah. Does the board accept the report? Okay, then we need a
Yes.
motion and a roll call vote.
Thank you.
So moved. The motion is to accept the water resource management.
Second.
Director Harrington.
Aye.
Director Gleason.
Yep.
Chairwoman Breeden.
Yes.
Director Page.
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
Okay, now we will go to the next item. Mr. Worth.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. Jim Worth, one of the legal counsel for the Groundwater Authority and attorney for the Water District. I'm here to provide a presentation on a recommended process for the board to consider when imposing a groundwater fee to help fund the development of the groundwater sustainability plan. At the meeting last month, staff provided an outline on the conceptual process that could be used to impose a groundwater fee. During that presentation, we identified several elements that warranted additional exploration, clarifying direction, and input from the public. Staff was directed to move forward on the conceptual plan and to come back to the board today with a recommended process to follow to impose groundwater fees. And this is what I'm going to cover right now. First thing staff is recommending is that the board utilize Water Code Section 10730 as the authority to impose the groundwater pumping fee. Water Code Section 10730 was implemented as part of SGMA, and we believe that it provides the board with adequate authority to impose groundwater pumping fees. The second aspect that was identified is the public engagement process. And with respect to Water Code Section 10730, all that is required prior to imposing a fee is that the board hold a public meeting. Has to be noticed and published in the paper pursuant to Government Code Section 6066, which is about a 2-week process. And the other additional requirement is that whatever data is relied upon in the board in imposing the fee needs to be made available to the public at least 20 days prior to this public meeting. At last month's board meeting, the board requested staff to consider additional processes where public input could be received over and above the public meeting. And so with respect to that, staff is recommending that the board hold a board workshop. I'll call it a board TAC workshop, and that would be held prior to the public meeting. And the board workshop that we envision would be held similar to the meeting today. There would be one item on the agenda, and that would be the discussion of the imposition of these groundwater fees. Staff would give a presentation, and just based on the sheer number of the PAC, TAC, and the board members, staff's recommending that any member of the public wanting to comment during the board workshop would prepare and provide a comment card prior to the meeting. The comment card is only to identify who wants to speak and also to give Madam Chair an idea of how many people want to comment. If there's, and I suspect there will be a large number of people that want to comment, I believe that reasonable time restraints would need to be placed upon members of the public. So if people are wanting or expecting to comment at that time, they should be prepared to be limited to 3 to 5 minutes, depending upon the number and what the board's process is. To try to make this board workshop as productive as possible, we're also recommending that the board would authorize staff to make available to the public any data that we have that the fee would be relied upon. So the public would have the opportunity at least 7 days in advance of the board workshop to review the data that we're relying on and to provide comment on that data at the board workshop. At the conclusion of the workshop, board would, if they want to, they would provide staff with additional direction, possibly directing staff to move forward with scheduling the public meeting, not the public meeting after the board workshop, and to finalize the data that we're going to rely upon. We're recommending that a possible date for the board workshop would be April 5th. That was the time would be 6 to 8 is our recommended time. I'm not sure 2 hours will be enough. That would be the discretion of the board. But the reason that April 5th was chosen, there's a couple of reasons. First, April 5th is the date that the TAC and PAC are presently scheduled to have their committee meetings. And that tells us that those members of the PAC and TAC will be in town on that day. The PAC, I believe, is scheduled to meet at 6 o'clock, but we believe that the board workshop should take precedent over the PAC committee meeting, as this would allow the board workshop to occur at night, which is what we hear all the time. If we're going to have a workshop, have it at night so more members of the public are able to attend. And so we thought that April 5th was a good date. 6 o'clock was a good time, maybe 5 if the board believes that the time would go longer. The next aspect of it is identifying the impacted pumpers. As was stated last month, and I'll say it again, de minimis pumpers, the Navy, and the Bureau of Land Management would all be exempt from this initial fee, which would only cover the development of the groundwater sustainability plan and any related administrative costs. With respect to that effort, staff's working closely with Stetson to compile the list of impacted pumpers. Most, if not all, of the impacted pumpers are going to be located within Kern County, and I believe that we have most of the data from Kern County, and Stetson right now is going through that and attempting to compile that list. I've seen it. It's quite extensive, but staff believes that, Stetson believes that they will have that list prepared well in advance of an April 5th board workshop, if that is the board's desire. The next and most important part of this pumping fee is a determination of what's required to get the groundwater authority to the finish line in terms of funds needed. And I should have said this up front, but there is a staff report that was included within the board packet. And so if you're looking at it, I would direct you to page 4, and there's a table in there that goes over the expenditures and the revenues. And I'll just quickly go through what that is. Under expenditures, the primary and the largest budget item is the budget for Stetson for preparation of the GSP, as well as the severely disadvantaged community projects. And those two items are approximately $3.7 million. We've gone further and we've estimated the administrative costs moving forward through the end of 2019 to be $161,500. An additional item that we've included is estimated cost to validate the GSP once it's approved by the board. The $100,000 is an estimate by Mr. Markman, who is special counsel for the Groundwater Authority, and that's the best estimate that he has. The last thing that we've included within the expenditures is what we consider a prudent reserve of 20%. It's a large number, but I would also note that right now the expenditures include the budgets from Stetson that were part of the Prop 1 application. We've already requested Stetson to assist us with preparing alternatives to groundwater pumping, as well as assisting in other tasks, identification of pumpers. And these are all tasks that were not included within the Prop 1 budget prepared by Stetson. So these are additional costs over and above this 3.7. So we believe that a 20% reserve is prudent in light of the uncertainties moving forward. And if we're going to do this, fee, we only want to do it one time, so we want to make sure that we have sufficient funds moving forward. The second component of that is how much would the fee be? And based on estimated pumping for non-de minimis Navy Bureau pumping, approximately 21,600 acre feet was pumped by, I'll call them what would be impacted pumpers. Based on the date, we've extrapolated out what would be needed over a 17-month period. And if you go to 21,600 acre feet and you multiply it by $50 an acre foot for the proposed fee, it would generate approximately, I believe, just over $1 million a year. And so a $50 fee would generate the needed $1.5 million in about 17 months. And so that's the number that's been included in the staff report. I'd also direct the board to footnote number 8 on page 4, and there's an additional number of about $1.1 million that if the board decides could be included within the required funds needed, and that $1.1 million consists of past costs contributed by the County of Kern, the City of Ridgecrest, as well as the Water District. Staff time helping to prepare, as well as moving forward through 2019. And so that number comes out to about 1.1 million acre feet. If the board were inclined to include that as funding needed.
Dollars.
Yes. What did I say?
1.1 million acre feet.
1.1 million dollars.
Not good money yet.
Not yet. $1.1 million. If the board were to include that as part of the funds needed, in order to generate the 2.6, which would be the new number needed, the assessment would have to increase to approximately $85 an acre foot. And using the same analysis that we did for the $50 an acre foot, that would reach the 2.6 million goal in 17 months. The next element is what type of measurement would we use for those groundwater wells that do not presently have meters on it. And I believe Mr. Johnson already provided the board with the status of where they are. And although we do not have a recommendation right now, if the board were to schedule an April 5th board workshop and authorize staff to distribute whatever data was available to the public, 7 days, we would have a good draft recommendation of what the recommendation would be for the alternative pumping. The last thing that we've considered is the billing. The fee would be assessed on a monthly basis, and once we've determined how we were going to measure the groundwater wells that do not have meters, we believe that we get a process going, and the billing would be done by the Groundwater Authority, presumably through the city or possibly the water district. There is a water code section within Sigma under 10730.6, which authorizes the groundwater authority to collect these fees that we believe are authorized under 10730, and it also provides the groundwater authority with certain remedies that we can pursue if we have any delinquent accounts. At this time, we're recommending that the board leave their options open and take whatever action is determined based upon the delinquent account. And that's our recommendation moving forward. The recommendation requested is that the board authorize staff to continue working on the proposal and to have us schedule a board workshop for April 5th, sometime in the evening in place of the PAC meeting, and to further authorize staff to make available to the public any data that we're going to utilize in imposing the groundwater fee. And that would conclude my presentation.
Thank you, sir. Comments from the board?
The dollar per acre foot is all based on this 17-month time frame that you've proposed, right?
It is.
So if, let's say, it looked ominous or whatever, expensive, would it be logical to extend the collection time frame, or is there a reason it has to be on the 2020?
The only reason it was the 17 months is that because that gets you to where when the GSP needs to be adopted. If the board were inclined to extend it further to reduce the fee, I believe that could be done.
Okay, and then the workshop that we're proposing to have in April would we would revisit these numbers that you have so far, and then with these other numbers you're talking about, adding a cost from each agency in there as well, correct? That'll be discussed at our workshop.
Yes, the way that it would the agenda would be set up is that anything related to this fee would be open for discussion. We wouldn't limit it to any aspect or any element of the proposed plan.
Okay. And all this would be available a week before, or 7 days, or whatever it is.
That's correct, and I call it draft data right now because based upon board workshop, and we do not have all of the data presently available, but there might be some additional data that's included or alternative data based upon the board workshop.
Okay, that's good. Thanks.
Other comments from the board or staff?
Chair, this is Bob.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I just wanted to get some clarification on the status of the tax recommendation. We had directed them to provide a recommendation on the best alternative means for measuring production in wells that don't have meters, and I understood from our water resource manager's report that he's been seeking some information from them, or he's sent out some questions, seeking some answers, and that he hopes that they will come to a recommendation at their meeting earlier in the day on the 5th, if we were to approve staff's recommendation to hold the workshop in the evening. What information is needed right now for them to make that recommendation?
Jim?
I would defer to Mr. Johnson on that, as the TAC, as I understand it, is working through the water resource manager. So I am just working with Stetson on that task.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question is, what information does the TAC need to make that recommendation? I think they have the information they need. There's suggested alternative methods, unless they have others. They may come up with something else, which I don't believe will happen. But basically, they have some alternative ways at which we would quantify production when we don't have an actual water meter. Alternatives were provided, and the idea, part of the idea of sending it to the TAC was because we're reaching out to the community, and the community, we're hoping that the community has a better handle than we do on the best ways to estimate the production, because they're out there and they know the folks that have these wells that don't have meters on them, and they know what they have and they don't have versus electrical records, or whether they've been reporting to the state or not reporting to the state, or whether they've been reporting to the
groundwater group or something like that could get back to us with more definitive information since they're out there with the community. So I think they have everything they need to respond, and we actually asked them to get the information back to us about 7 days before the meeting, but I think that's still a little bit tight for us to wait on for the information we want to get out ahead of the proposed workshop that we're having. So we will be coordinating what they provide with what we come up with, but I think they have everything that they need. It's just a matter of them getting back to us on what their thoughts are.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so,
Peter?
Chair, my question
Wait a
is
minute.
then...
Bob, go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is that, you know, we tasked the TAC to come up with this recommendation. They didn't agree upon a recommendation at their last meeting, so they've got another meeting coming up on April 5th. Is there, I mean, I understand we want to make sure there's as much data out there available to the public ahead of the workshop so they can digest it. But on this specific issue of how we potentially proceed with measuring wells without meters on them, is that something that's critical for the Water Resources Manager to make a recommendation before the TAC has, or can that just be something where it's part of the staff report at the workshop, if it's held that same day, can be part of that staff report? Here's what the TAC just did a few hours ago in terms of their recommendation. Is that something that's so critical that the public has to have a week's notice in terms of what their recommendation is, or can that just be part of the whole workshop process of information that's shared?
Steve?
Sure. The best way I can answer that, Bob, is that I think in our discussions we're having about this workshop is the goal that I've heard discussed, and we concur, obviously, is to try to get the public as much information as we can ahead of the workshop. So I don't have any problem with putting together some suggestions for the data package that goes out ahead of time, and at the same time being able to report what the TAC reports at the meeting earlier in the day, because we hopefully will have something then too. So I don't have any problem doing it both ways or however they want. But the goal is just to try to get as much information, everything that we know, to try to get it out to the public so they have an opportunity to digest that ahead of time and then at the meeting. So we can certainly do both.
Peter, I understand you have
I don't think Bob's done.
Bob, are you done?
Yes, I was just going to say it. I'm okay with providing information to the public ahead of the workshop about what the options are that the TAC is considering, so that they understand what all the potential measurements might be. But I just want to make sure that that's all that is. It's not the Water Resource Manager making a recommendation ahead of the workshop as to what the TAC should decide. I would like to let the TAC make that recommendation, but I'm okay with the public seeing, you know, what they're considering.
Yeah, that's understood. That's understood. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Peter?
Hey, Bob, you stole my thunder again. That's exactly what I was going to say. Why don't we just list the options that we know of? I mean, there's a few, how to quantify pumping over a year's time or whatever. So I think that would be sufficient. The actual calculations and stuff, that I guess we would talk about that at the workshop. But as long as they're listed, I think we've done good. You know, I mean, that's what people want to see. How is this going to be factored? And where do I fit into that equation?
Understood.
Did you want to say something? No. Nick, did you have something? Okay. I think one of the things I wanted to make sure we understood that the de minimis user, those people that are using less than 2 acre-feet a year, at this point in time are not considered part of those people to be charged. And so that would eliminate probably most of the people in the valley that are pumping water. It would not eliminate those who are using more than that. And if you don't know what you're using, please contact us and we'll be able to help you if you are a de minimis user, to help you determine that you are. And if you are, you pretty much know from your electrical and what you have, you're not pumping water onto a lot of ag usage or to what is using as your own landscaping use. So most of you would not be involved as far as that goes right now. Other public under board comments? Public comment.
Stan Rotora. This agenda item assumes that there is only one funding stream available for us right now to look at. And I have stood up here on a previous occasion, or maybe two, I don't know, discussing other options that I think also need to be investigated before we get too serious about this particular pumping fee. I understand we need money. I'm perhaps one of the few people that have stood up here and argued that we need money. It's going to cost a lot of money, but we do need to be concerned where the money is coming from. In the past, I've mentioned to you that the county is getting agricultural tax off of the land every year, and has been for the last probably 100 years. The county doesn't pump a lot of water. I don't know how much they pump for their parks, but they are getting tax money off of the water that is pumped. And the farmers, not against farmers, but they pump a lot of water, and the county gets taxes off of all of that water that's being pumped. So one of the things that we need to know and understand is what liability does the county have in supporting the various requirements of this board. As a matter of fact, the county actually encouraged the farmers to start farming, and is the one that actually provided the agricultural well permits to do that. The second funding stream, which is a little bit more difficult, would be the Navy. Obviously, we can't give them a bill, and we never will. However, we can work through our legislative people to try to get some funding out of Congress in support of our efforts. The Navy has sent 2 letters to the county over the last couple of years talking about encroachment of the water use encroaching on the mission of the Navy. So obviously the Navy knows that this is a problem. The Navy has encroachment money to spend. I'm not saying it would be simple, and I'm not saying that it would be short term. Nothing when you start talking to the Navy is short term. We all know that, but we still need to start working those issues. Both the county should be a more near term, hopefully, issue, and the Navy being a longer term issue. But I think it is just premature to think that the water users should bear the entire impact of the costs that we're talking about. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Penelope Lapome, and I live within the city, and I am making some assumptions listening to this discussion that the Indian Wells Water District is more than a de minimis pumper. Yeah. So as a resident, I assume that my water bill will go up because the water district is going to have to pay something. And how do we figure that?
Well, that needs to be discovered by what we decide the actual numbers are. So right now it's like we're looking at the process. And so we wanted numbers in this process so that we could kind of see how it interfaces. Every cost that the water district incurs is always passed on in a rate of some sort.
Yes.
I have no idea how this will work. We're in a rate study right now, and usually our rate studies are projecting expenses 3 to 5 years into the future that are logical and reasonable. I can't say that the minute we start to pay something or like a pumping fee that there'd be any change in your water bill. Because we're water. I mean, that's what we do. But with everybody else, it's a little different. But I do know that sometime in the future, there'll be something there. And I have no idea what that'll be or how we would expense it out or cost it out. But like when we built the arsenic plants and we spent $14 million that we didn't really want to spend, we made sure that was a line item on the bill because we didn't want to do it, but the state made us do it. The state's making us do this now.
Right.
So we'll have to do what we have to do. But as far as the numbers that we're looking at right now, I can't. I guess my best guess, and I've seen this before, was like $2 a month or something. And I really don't know what that means. I don't know how we're going to do it. We might just decide to. I don't know what we'll decide to do. The board will have to discuss that, but it would be because we're dividing it by 13,000 people or connections or whatever we have now. It's not nearly the impact it would be for if you were a single guy, having a farm or something.
About how much pumping do they do on average? I mean, are we talking 200 acre feet? I have no clue.
Yeah. I'm sure Mr. Johnson could be the numbers guy or somebody else here, but like you said, there's like 21,600 acre feet out there to divide into funds.
Right.
And that was how this particular projection was created. But these numbers will continually be refined as we get refined numbers on actual production. Mm-hmm. I would say he's in a good range, though. I mean, I don't think it's going to shift a lot. I just think that it'll just get better, and the data will get better, and we'll be able to rely on the actual production numbers. And then on the other side, what are the actual costs going to be? Because we're kind of creating administrative fees and stuff as a placeholder, and so I think as we visit all those costs, we can define them better, and they'll be more accurate. So I guess stay tuned to the meeting in April. But in the meantime, the Water District has no intention on doing anything rate-wise until our rate study is done, and that's going to take a few months. And that's just to take care of what we already know. We might put a placeholder in there for future water, whatever. But again, that's my board's decision. Does that answer your question?
Well, I think so. Obviously, my point is that I get a bill and my water usage is like this much, but the bill is that much. And so I'm paying for the arsenic and the delivery and all of that. And that's more than what I pay for the actual water.
Well, I understand that. Maybe the new rate system will look different or better or more equitable.
It might promote conservation.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Joshua Nugent on behalf of Mojave Pistachios and Nugent Ranches, and I just wanted to tell you guys thank you for setting up the night meeting to allow additional discussion and transparency on the funding needs for the GSA. While we support the concept of volumetric fees based on groundwater production, the proposed fees were much higher than we expected. There should also have been a more robust discourse between the GA board and the public about how the budget was developed. We feel communication is key to building trust amongst the interested parties in the Indian Wells Valley, and we're supportive of the continuing opening up of financial discussions that will impact all of us, and we look forward to reviewing the new documents. On a much lighter note, we'll also provide pizza for the night meeting.
Yay.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Pepperoni and jalapeno.
Derek Hoffman, legal counsel for Meadowbrook. Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the board and staff. I sent a comment letter yesterday afternoon to each member of the board and staff, and I understand that you all have that in front of you. I have an extra copy I'll leave with Ms. Duffy today for the record. And I appreciate at the front end of this, I'll say, the board's desire to do more than the minimum requirement for engaging the public. I appreciate that. We all do. And I also appreciate Mr. Worth's memorandum that he put out in draft for today for discussion to begin the conversation. I think those are both very good things. That being said, there are a number of issues and questions that the memorandum raises that I detailed in my letter. And in the very limited time that I have, I will simply review some of those issues. And ultimately, I'm asking that you consider them carefully before you schedule workshops or move ahead on these issues, because ultimately, imposing fees is one of the largest issues that this board will face, I believe, regarding this process. So my comments track the headings in Mr. Worth's memo, and they're meant to offer additional things for you to consider. The first is with regard to the authority to impose fees. Mr. Worth referenced, I should say the memo referenced Water Code Section 10730, but it does not address the constitutional provisions of Propositions 26 and 218 or their implementing statutes or decisional law. And I would suggest that the memorandum address those questions just to provide that insight and what the board thinks on those items. The second is regarding public engagement. And as I mentioned, we appreciate that the board seeks to do more than the minimum. And the proposal suggests a workshop, and I just offer a few alternative thoughts for you, please. The first is, I suggest the board establish the Standing Finance Committee. That committee ought to be established and bring forward and illuminate the public on what the ad hoc committee has been doing for many months now. Second, while the proposed workshop is a good idea, I agree with that, I think the timing is critical. I believe these issues should be presented to the Standing Finance Committee to be established, and then also to the PAC and to the TAC. This is one of the most critical issues. I think the PAC and the TAC need a chance to weigh in on that and not be relegated to a 3 or possibly fewer minutes comment as a member of the public at a large workshop. I also believe that April 5th is probably too soon to hold that workshop, given the amount of data that's needed to be prepared, given the questions that Mr. Page, Director Page mentioned a moment ago. There ought to be a sequencing here by which this question goes through the committees, then to a workshop, and ultimately back to the board. And also the data that's going to be prepared and presented, in my opinion, ought to be given at least 2 weeks before those meetings to give people a chance to look at that. It's going to be a lot of information. Next, and I'll move quickly, I thank you. If I may, Madam Chair, thank you. I'll be brief. The next issue is the impacted pumpers identification. I believe you really can't impose a fee until you know who all the pumpers are, and I believe that question is being looked at. I think that's an important question. And next, I'd talk about the exempted pumpers. In my opinion, we all recognize that the groundwater basin is a shared resource and that it supports many uses and users of groundwater. And so correspondingly, I believe the Groundwater Authority should adhere to a policy that seeks to include as many, if not all, beneficial uses and users of groundwater to the maximum extent allowed by law in the process and programs by which sustainability will be achieved. Now, the memorandum suggests that de minimis pumpers will be excluded from that. And current data, and it is draft, I understand, suggests that this group commands a potentially very large amount of the water being produced in this basin and a potentially large portion of the yield of the basin. And so, in my view, failure to include the de minimis pumpers in shouldering at least some portion of this proposed Water Code 10730 fee would be unfair, and it would exclude them from participating in the solution.
If you could, I gave others an extra minute.
And my final comment, if I may, thank you, Madam Chair, is that the numbers provided in the memo have some work to be done. There's a lot of questions in there, I believe, not only with regard to the estimates that are given, but also the assumptions on which they're based, and finally on whether or not any particular item may be recovered through a Water Code 10730 fee. And so I think, and I understand it's in draft, but there are a lot of questions that remain to be addressed in that proposal. So I truly appreciate the additional time you've given me, Madam Chair. Thank you. And would ask you to consider this letter carefully before we move too quickly on this very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Board. Mike Neal. I want to heartily support the statement by Mr. Rotora concerning the county, the tax received by the county on water pumping in this portion of the county. And I thoroughly believe that a large portion of that tax collected by the county should come back to these costs. We need to look at that. That's not on the list as revenue. We also need to have a finance committee, I believe, in place and looking at this issue before we proceed down this road. The point would be that we have other persons. We have, one sitting in this room is extremely adept at reviewing and analyzing financial data, and I'm sure he'll be doing that given a finance committee being put in place. There's a lot that needs to be considered. Number one, I've been involved far too long in these things, and I will recall the sewer tax being raised by the city council years ago, and it was debated by myself, Mr. Torra, and a former council member as being too high. And it's proved itself to be far too high, to the tune of about 30%. So the people in Ridgecrest are paying 30% more on that tax than they should have, based on faulty data and claims. Projecting costs into the future, based on the fact that we were given costs for the water resources manager, which had now readily and early on in the game shown to be themselves underestimated by the ad hoc committee that made the recommendation to the tune of 3 to 4 times. I don't have a lot of confidence that cost projections are being done very accurately. So this needs to be looked at carefully. Most of the people who might come to the workshop, especially with the incentive of free pizza, probably don't understand these things very well and need time to be exposed to the facts, given the numbers, and have the confidence that not just the board and some ad hoc, member looking at so forth and so on, but a well-done finance committee looking at this, and the PAC and the TAC discussing this, which means the prior suggestion of delaying it past April the 5th is also a very good suggestion. Let's get those other steps done before we do that.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, any other? Go ahead, please. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate all the public comments. I got a couple thoughts. Let me start with Mr. Hoffman, who made some interesting comments. I agree with some of the stuff he said. I disagree with some of the stuff he said. First of all, the definition of meaningful participation, I think we need to truly understand that, and we made promises, and I think we need to deliver. In that vein, what I think the format for this workshop we do, which I recommend stays still at April 5th, because it needs to be done because we're on a crunch timeline to get the plan out. I think we need to keep moving in the right direction, keep things moving. But this format, I think, should delegate more consideration for the TAC and the PAC. So I would recommend that the format change slightly so that we allow the public to participate with the card system that was recommended by Mr. Worth, and they give them 3 to 5 minutes or something like that. Madam Chair, you control that. Then the way this meeting would be set up with the PAC and the TAC would be separated from the public, and once the public hearing is closed and the public stops make with their input, then we open up opportunity for the PAC and the TAC to make contributions, and how you manage those contributions, Madam Chair, would be up to you, but I would suggest that we give them a certain amount of time, depending upon how long we want the meeting to go. But it may very well exceed the 3 to 5 minutes that we give the public. In some cases, it may be less. But we afford them the opportunity to make more meaningful contribution to the discussion. Then, with the PAC and the TAC are completed, then it comes to the board, and the board would be there to have a conversation, to answer questions that were raised during the public presentations and the PAC and the TAC presentations. And we have a discussion a public discussion amongst the board, and then make a referral to staff based on what our recommendations would be in terms of how we're going to manage the time frame and the rates and all the other issues. I also like the fact that we're doing this at night. I think it's important that we allow the most people to participate in nighttime. I think would accommodate that. I don't think it did the last time we tried it, but I think we should try it again and see how it goes. I also agree with Mr. Hoffman about the estimates. I don't think they were refined, and I think we need to really nail those down so we come to the table with something a little more accurate than what we have. As far as the county tax, a couple of people brought that up. County ag taxes aren't much, and they go into, much of them goes directly into the general fund, and we have a general fund that then sends out taxes in all different types of venues to pay for services that we deliver. We did a study in the past year, maybe a year and a half, where we made a determination that for every tax dollar that Kern County pays, whether it's agriculture, property tax, or what have you, for every dollar we get $2.01 back in in services. So for every dollar we put in, we get about $2 back. I know that a study was done in 2007, which came up with slightly different numbers, but it was close to the same. And that's something that I look at on a regular basis to make sure that the county's budget is managed properly and fairly across a broad spectrum of the county, not just, I hear the argument all the time that we're Bakersfield-centric and that we spend our dollars there. Well, I try to make sure that, to counter that argument, that I understand that we keep a certain level of service dollars that go to the outskirts of the county, and that stays relatively the same. I also agree, and I want to have further conversation about recouping past expenses and costs that the county has thrown in to get us to where we are today. I want to say that the county didn't do that thinking that we were going to get those dollars back. So I agree with comments I've heard from other people that those are highly negotiable, and I'd be willing to sit down with anybody and have those conversations. So that's my thoughts, and I'm ready to make a recommendation on staff's vote on staff's recommendation based on changing the format to accommodate the TAC and the PAC a little more, give them a little more meaningful participation, and that's my motion.
Is there a second on that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, now more discussion. Any other discussion on that motion?
Just to clarify, Madam Chair, Mr. Gleason, is it also part of your motion to do the second part of the recommendation about distributing the available public data 7 days in advance of the workshop?
That's right.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Okay. We're going to do this by resolution.
Chair Breeden.
Bob, did you have a comment?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to hit the unmute button and it took me a second there. The one comment I wanted to make before we vote was there was a comment about, and I agree with Mick that there's some additional refinement that can be done on the SCAP funding and making sure we're comfortable with the numbers. But the concept that this is the first time these numbers are getting out there, while that might be true for some of the numbers that staff has presented, such as Mr. Markman's estimate on how much it would cost to validate the GSP adoption and the administrative costs for the GSA through the adoption of the GSP, the primary number that's in here, which is the Stetson's GSP and severely disadvantaged communities budget, that number was vetted by the public already. It went through the TAC and when the Prop 1 application was put together. So I just wanted to point out that this number is not a secret number that just all of a sudden got put out there. It was part of our application that went through a couple different meetings, as I recall, with the TAC that our water resource manager had to identify exactly what we wanted to apply for and what it was going to cost. And so that was just something I wanted to point out. This is not a new number. This is something that has gone through our advisory committee already.
Okay, I would like to add also that I would like to see a further refinement, definition, or whatever of the costs so that we understand it more fully. They are, and I'd like to be able to define it as what those costs are, not necessarily in dollars, but where they're going to go. So if you could help us understand that more fully, at least help me understand it more fully. Okay, is there any other discussion from the board? Okay, motion and been seconded. The vote.
Director Harrington?
Aye.
Director Gleason?
Aye.
Chairwoman Breeden?
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown?
Aye.
Director Page?
Aye.
Okay. Motion's approved then. All right, the next item we are going to go to is the budget, the Finance Committee item, and I think that is number 9. Bob, and that committee is Bob and Mr. Brown.
My blood
Peter?
sugar's low. I'm waning. I keep looking at that clock back there, and I'm thinking, man, it feels later than that. And then I just realized it's off by a whole hour.
It is.
Oh, good. So I don't feel so bad. Bob, you want me to take it, or do you want to take it?
I'm fine with you since you're there. I'm fine with you starting it. You're there. Go ahead.
Okay. I have faith that you'll pipe in if I say something wrong. Okay. So, anyways, we did talk. We had Bob and I met with staff, and we talked about the Standing Finance Committee. I've been pushing for that for forever. I think a couple of years. And we talked about it quite a bit. In the original intent that I had wanted to do it for was to because what I perceived as a gap coming in our budget between the grant awards actually being awarded and the money we're spending in our current burn rate. There was obviously some kind of a cash flow shortage looming, and we saw that way in advance. And so that was the purpose of actually asking to have one. We've kind of taken care of that with the grant and with the advance by the water district. So I started to think or rethink what would I do with a finance committee. And that was actually kind of a weird question to ask myself because I was so sold on finance, and so and I'm still not against that, by the way. But maybe I want to call it something different. I don't know. But the point was, if you only have two sources of income and one person we're paying, there's not a lot to discuss about, and I'm not talking about budgeting, but I'm just talking about expenditure of funds. And then I looked at how the water district uses our finance committee. And I also understand that other counties don't even have a finance committee, which I thought was interesting. But it's just the way they process their information differently. But we sit there and we have capital purchases. We decide on if something is due to be replaced, or how are we going to fund this next project, or how the insurance costs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And those are important things to discuss because that gives us a preemptive capacity to deal with future. And everything we do is based on the future. You can't really do much like right now because it's kind of too late for that. So everything that I think about is how can we be proactive and predict the future as much as possible, and then implement. And so our finance, our CFO gives us the skinny on our bills we paid. So we have our pulse on the cash flow and things like that. This is a little different because we have a payment to Stetson and two incomes. So I couldn't really justify why I would have one now. But then we presented the question to the staff, and I said, when would we need a finance committee, or what would constitute that? And one comment was, well, when you actually have an operation that's up and running. In other words, you have like staff, and you have some employees or an employee, and you have multiple costs, multiple sources of income, collections, et cetera, et cetera. So right now I'm leaning in that direction, but my want is that this workshop would kind of help define that. And that's why we wanted a workshop, is because we want to make sure that we're on the right tack. We want, not to misuse the word tack, we're on the right course, and then and listen to what everybody else has to say. I think there's credibility in looking for alternate money. I think there always is, and there always should be. But I think those are pretty basic questions. I think we just heard from Mick that we're getting $2 for every dollar we give him. I don't know if he'll want to give us another $1, but I would more than happy to take it. As far as the U.S. government goes, I have no idea how that works out, but I certainly wouldn't hurt to ask. But that would be a long time discussion, so there would be no real need to have a discussion in a committee about that. It would just be something that we could ask. But I would say that bring your ideas to the workshop. It's a good place to talk about money because that's what this workshop is for. And then give me something more compelling that, or us something more compelling that we would have a standing committee, because I really don't know if we would actually need any more finance talking. These ad hocs were just made to solve a single problem, and I don't know what other problems we have to solve as long as the grant gets awarded. So Bob, pick it up.
Thank you, Peter. I would agree that most of the work that the ad hoc committee has done was focused initially on the cash flow issue, and that mentioned that we've been spending months working on this fee. I understand while the ad hoc doesn't happen in a public meeting, it's difficult to know what we've been doing, but really the work on the fee has been very much out in the public in the last few meetings. That's been the ad hoc committee's direction to staff is you come up with a recommendation and present it to the board. We haven't been having any decisions made at the ad hoc committee. It's been just a decision of, tell us what you think we have the authority to do, how much money do we need, and what's our best course of action. And now we're also talking about how do we make sure that beyond these board meeting presentations, we get a little bit more public participation in the process. So I agree with Peter that until we potentially have a more complicated budget where we have full-time staff or have to start actually building projects once the plan's adopted, I don't see an immediate need for a standing finance committee. But I also agree with Peter that we may hear some stuff at the workshop that identifies a reason to start having more in-depth discussions about those kind of things.
So your recommendation is, gentlemen, to postpone?
Well, I think our recommendation is that we don't see a function to have one at this time, and the logic I stated earlier would give us a trigger or a point in time that would seem logical. But even as we get to that point in time, you would evaluate it based on what's really happening and the complexity of what we adopt as a plan and what it would take to implement it. I mean, I have some idea of how the plan is going to look, but I really don't know for sure. So I think it's a wait and see what's going to happen next. As long as we have our funding covered, and this workshop will help us achieve that, I think we're good to go with the process that we have. And you made a really good point, Bob. There is no decision making at the ad hoc. It's more of like just a discovery, and then direct staff to give us information. And I'm really pleased that we have this draft document with numbers in it, because to me that makes it more real. And that was what Bob and I were always wanting to share, is that these are real numbers instead of just a concept. The concept has numbers, you can see impacts, and you can see how we derive at the cost. So the workshop, I think, should vet all this information and give everybody a chance to participate much beyond a standing finance committee.
Okay, so any direction then, further direction from the board? Okay. Any public comment?
Stan Rotora. I would hope that we would all agree at this point in time that some of the original estimates for the budget for this organization were incorrect, to speak nicely of them. And now we're being told that we have to have a workshop on April 5th because we're in a hurry to get something done. Again, a matter of lack of planning that I think should have been done. All of which I think leads to having a finance committee who is really responsible for seeing that we have timely information, and we have not over the last year or two. Just to address one comment that Mr. Gleason made is the fact that the money for the property tax goes into the general fund doesn't mean a whole lot, quite frankly. The county is generating tax money off of water that is being pulled out of our valley. Everybody else is going to be paying money for water being pulled out of this valley. I believe the general plan, the county general plan, makes it a county responsibility to provide water to the county, as well as provide, I think what it says is reasonable quality of water. So I think there may be a legal issue here, but I do believe that the county is liable in terms of supporting getting water to this valley and maintaining a certain quality of that water. If we have to sue the county to get money for this organization, then so be it. But I firmly believe, after reading the general plan for the county, that they have a responsibility, and by shirking it, they're not doing us a favor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alan Christensen, County of Kern. For clarification, county property tax, generally speaking, is calculated on assessed valuation. There is no additional dollars coming to the county for pumped groundwater of any kind. Let me repeat. There is no additional property tax coming to the county for pumped water of any kind. Students of, on another subject, students of local government in general, and the city would tell you the same thing, property tax dollars, for every property tax dollar generated, does not cover the cost of services, let alone other services, for sheriff and fire alone. Doesn't even cover those costs. So it may be on the order of covers 40 to 50% of the cost of those services. So as was stated, if you desire to sue the county for to access general fund property tax dollars, you'd be fighting with the sheriff's department and the fire department of the county, which are critical services of the county. Just for clarity's sake, I wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Getting less desirable to come speak up here as we have board people dissipating from the meeting. But anyway, for those who are here, my name is Mike Neal, and just like to let us not be short-sighted in considering having a standing finance committee. We're not really, I don't believe, in my mind, talking about, well, let's have a finance committee just so we can take a cursory look at current income and current expenses, and go through those line item by line item and rubber stamp what's going on in the organization. We're talking, right at this very meeting about instituting a tax upon people. That's not even, we're not even talking about looking at the cost of importing water, which, pretty much everyone is saying, well, that's going to happen. We're going to have to do that. Finance committee can look into the future, start thinking, help the board think about what are we going to do about this? Just so, you get a firm something to lay a hold on here. If you just use a metric of charging $50 per acre foot, translating to $22 per year per person, when you start importing water, about the cheapest you're going to get out of buying water and distributing water is somewhere between 30 and 40 times that much. Now you're talking about adding an additional $800 to $1,000 a year to people's cost of living in this valley. If you don't think you need to start looking well ahead with the help of a finance committee to help deal with that, and the outcry you're going to get from the public when they figure this out one way or the other sometime in the future, and I'm going to try to help them be aware that this is coming, because it is coming, then I guess I don't know what to tell you. I think a finance committee would be essential in helping to try to figure out, well, how in the world are we not going to make this any more painful than it has to be? Because I guarantee you there are many people in this valley, when you walk up to them today and tell them, I need $1,000 from you, they're going to be saying, well, you might as well shoot me because I don't have an extra $1,000 to pay you. Okay? But they're going to be forced, because guess what? They don't want to die of dehydration, and they want their water. So, it's going to be forced upon them. They're not going to have a choice. We've already got the law in place that says, we're going to send people after you to make you comply. So you better start thinking ahead and putting the mechanisms in place you need to help you do that.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Mine is real short. When you have this large meeting, I hope you can find a large place to have it. When the TAC and the PAC had their joint meeting last October, we were all squished into a very small room. You hopefully will have a lot of public attendance, so you need a large place to hold everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Derek Hoffman, legal counsel for Meadowbrook. A couple things. The issue of the fees, as I mentioned in my letter, is an important issue for the TAC and the PAC to address, clearly. But as I also indicated, and I would reiterate, there's also an important role for a standing finance committee of this board. Those two members of this board who are ultimately part of the decision-making group to receive input directly from the public on a very important issue. The TAC and the PAC also have a number of other critical things they'll be looking at. But for this issue, I believe that a standing finance committee is appropriate and it's needed, not only for this, but for other financial decisions that will very likely come up. And so for that reason, I would suggest that the board reconsider that and do establish a finance standing committee. I know that there are costs associated with running such a committee, but we're talking about significant costs that are about to be potentially imposed on water users and pumpers in the basin. And next, I'd also just like to suggest and I guess request that the board look at whether item 10 was properly noticed for action today. I got to say, when I read item 10, it doesn't refer to action items as an action item. And attached to item 10 was a memo that was clearly marked in draft. So I would just ask that you consider that. And again, I think it's important to take a little time and properly vet this issue through the appropriate committees, including a standing finance committee, before you move too far and too fast on a Water Code 10730 fee or any other fee for that matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the item on the Peter.
I just wanted to respond. You actually make a very compelling point, and I thought about that in my statement after also reading your very well written response. That's something that is on my mind. It's like via the water district, we established a specific committee for the JPA and the GSA, so people could talk firsthand, at least with us, the water district, and that gave them a way to communicate. So I'm not opposed to having a finance committee. I just want to know what the function would be and how it would work and what would our charge be. But I don't have any problem having a committee where people can ask me questions real time and not have 2.8 seconds or whatever to respond. But before I would want to do that, I just want to know how that would work, what our function would be, what our objective would be. But to me, the most compelling, I mean, we're already budgeting as a board here. These budget items are continually circulated, and we make these decisions jointly in public. But to me, the most compelling part of what you stated was people to have access to at least 2 board members and have a much less intimidating environment where there's not so much time constraints. So it's not off the table. It's just for everybody, what would we do? And maybe it would be quarterly. I don't know. I just don't see it working as the function as the water district currently uses a finance committee.
So, Bob and Peter, your recommendation is to not do one at this time. Right. Is that correct, yeah. Bob?
That's correct, and I would just add in response to one of the things that Mr. Neal said about looking forward at what costs might be coming down that we might need to start preparing for and thinking about. I believe the board is already aware of what those things are that we're going to have to pay attention to, and is already being discussed with our advisory committees through the development of the GSP. I don't think a finance committee could put a dollar amount on the cost of constructing infrastructure and the cost of purchasing imported water at GSP's not done, and our water resource manager and the TAC and the PAC are still working through those things. But the fact that they're working through those things in a public meeting, in a public process, to me indicates we are thinking about those things, and we're not ignoring them. And there are multiple opportunities right now for the public to get involved in that discussion.
Okay, so I'm going to call a question.
Do you need a vote? I don't think there's a motion pending.
You don't need?
My understanding was you do accept the reports that are presented to the board.
Yeah. All right.
And so I believe this came in the form of a report.
All right. Thank you. All right, then we are going to go on then to item number 11 from the Technical Advisory Committee.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I wasn't clear. My recommendation was to receive a motion to receive and refile the report.
Motion to receive and file.
Second.
We're the only two. No, Bob can say it.
There's 3. There's 4.
We're here. We're good.
Yeah.
I forget Bob's
Okay.
up in the sky.
Motion. Then do we don't need to vote on that, or do we?
We do need a roll call vote.
Roll call vote. All right. Thank you.
Director Harrington.
Aye.
Chairwoman Breeden.
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
Director Page.
Aye.
All right. Now we will go to the Technical Advisory Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We'll go through this fairly quickly. The WRM and TAC discussion was the first item that was done at the meeting. Stetson presented the priority projects and tasks. The first one, A, modeling update, was reviewed. We reviewed coordination with Navy and the DRI on the GSP numerical model upgrades, including Navy funding, DRI, and the schedule within the POAM. Recommended 1 or 2 DRI workshops in June and July with TAC ad hoc. TAC identified 3 ad hoc participants. The DRI model upgrades include 3 GSP requirements, by the way. Model work will be coordinated with the Ramble and Water District model. Item B, water balance elements update was provided. These elements were reviewed and some historical pumping was provided. Yearly historical pumpage provided by the co-op group is available, and an update of the well locations is needed. Pumping estimates will be brought back to the TAC before modeling. Item C, Stetson outline on recycled water opportunities was presented, discussed septic tank flow and potential sewer collection and use. Kern County reported the Environmental Health Department has septic tank data. Discussed possible wastewater treatment plant effluent use for agricultural and possible advanced treatment for recharge. Current recycled water use is for alfalfa and Navy golf course. Possible state federal funding for developing more recycled water use. There's a need to fully utilize recycled water as a local water resource. D, imported water opportunities were then presented. Potential sources of alternative and imported water were presented. Water use and storage, including stormwaters, available for recharge and review of conservation efforts were discussed. Existing water systems leakage, desalinization exchanges, banking, effluent transport in piping, and even railroad car delivery was discussed. Potential constraints and costs for other projects were presented, and Kern County reported on a new storage program and the availability of banked water at AVEC. Item E, TAC discussion on groundwater production information needed to meet the GSP state requirements, i.e. Kern County reported well data is available. Rural water use data and septic data comments were given. TAC to provide input on questions from Jim Worth, attorney, and WRM. That was done. Item G, POAM and PAS progress was discussed. Ongoing revisions will be available and monthly meeting tasks will be updated. There was a motion by the TAC members that requested comments from the TAC to WRM be included with agenda packages or meeting minutes as appropriate, so that this information will be available to the public. These packages with TAC comments should be placed on the website. Two more here. Future agenda meeting items will be updated and set for meetings and provided in the PAS. Future dates are set up. However, the July date and time may need to be changed in order to meet quorum requirements. having enough people there, essentially. Each member will give 2 additional dates for meetings to Stetson to then be presented to you all with the GA. Earl Wilson commented the data must be validated, and Tim Parker announced the upcoming Groundwater Symposium and GSA Summit in Sacramento. The meeting was finished and adjourned at 4:22 that day.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
We will file and accept a motion to file and accept that report.
Motion to file and accept.
I'll second the motion, and thank you for driving up here to do that.
Yeah. My pleasure.
Director Harrington.
Aye.
Chairwoman Breeden.
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
And Director Page.
Aye.
Okay. Adam, I understand you have an item you'd like to add right this moment.
Kind of a verbal one in a melodic format.
Oh.
You need some water?
Which item is?
It's the person sitting next to you at the special day.
And what language would you like that?
Portuguese.
And would you like that? Well, Portuguese I can't do. Or I can just do it with lots of different fun ways of singing songs. Happy birthday.
Yay! Pre-clap.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Canteadori cara nostra. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
You're welcome.
Yay! What a range. What a range.
Okay, and there is no action item, so we will go to the PAC report.
I think you should be American Idol.
The following items and actions and discussions took place at the March 1st, 2018 PAC meeting. Agenda item 2, review of those submitting their Form 700. Only 4 PAC members need to submit those. And I think that would be by the end of the month, as I understand the deadline. Agenda item 3, no public comment. Item 4, approval of the February 1st, 2018 minutes. Item 5, review of the PAC action schedule. The discussion of the updated form was rolled into the discussion for agenda item number 6 on our CNE plan. Agenda item 6, potential actions to implement components for outreach strategy of the CNE plan. The PAC worked to fill in the CNE plan outline. Regarding CNE items 1A and 1AI, the background items relating to the background for the GSA and GSP, Steve Johnson sent to the PAC some information from the Prop 1 funding application to be used for the outline. If the PAC needs further information, we will contact the Water Resources Manager and IWV GA staff. Based on an email from Phil Hall with his clarification regarding the outline item 1D, overriding concerns, major concerns, or challenges, that the item related to challenges to the CNE plan and not the GSP plan, then he stated that he, for one, is fine with and welcomes the discussion, and I attached a copy of his email. So we would just like to be sure that the others who commented on that item and expressed concerns that they concur with this clarification by Phil Hall. I would like to recognize the work of David Janis, who presented a comprehensive and extensive handout identifying additional groups for communications outreach, CNE item number 4. The list was 4 pages in length. Other PAC members will provide additional input for the list and will finalize it at the next meeting when we discuss the plan. I also commend Josh Nugent and Mojave Pistachios for assistance to Kern County to set up the IWVGA.org website. And I would like to thank Lorelei Oviatt for her facilitation of our discussions regarding the C&E plan development. We had hoped to discuss the plan and finalize it at the meeting on April 5th. We wanted to get it to the IWVGA board by the April 19th, 2018 meeting. However, in order to do that, we may have to try to get together a special meeting to finish that, and perhaps even to discuss, to have some input on the fee proposal. And I will contact my committee members and see if we can squeeze in another meeting the end of March, the final week of March, if possible. I want to be sure that we would have a quorum, so I will do some outreach to the committee members. The other attachment to my report is an email from Steve Johnson, the Water Resources Manager. He had 3 questions for the PAC to look at. And we had a very short, brief, cursory discussion of the 3 questions because we spent most of our time talking about the plan and we adjourned at 8:30, so it was a very short discussion. But we think that all of those 3 questions will be addressed in the draft of the C&E plan. We just asked for more specific clarification of the deliverable documents written to comply with Sigma GSP. So we had no future agenda items suggested and no committee member announcements. So we adjourned our meeting at 8:30.
We're coming back to the board of board direction to you.
No, just approval from the board to squeeze in an extra meeting if we can get it organized.
I don't think you need our approval to do that, but we certainly want you to meet, and we encourage you to go ahead and contact your members so you can have that meeting. We'd like to hear what you have to say on the 5th.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Mr. Hall has brought to my attention the fact that bylaws do require the authority's permission to allow the PAC to have another meeting. Is that correct?
Yes.
I thought it was just to take the place of the meeting that they weren't going to have.
That's fine. The issue goes back to the board setting PAC meetings because of cost issues. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that this board approves those. There is a process, and I can pull it out of the bylaws, where the chair, in this case Peggy, it used to be Nick, could approve those also. But the PAC doesn't set its meeting. The board says, yes, go.
So what is the direction required from?
You to say yes?
Madam Chair?
Okay. The chair can authorize?
Chair can authorize.
Okay. Chair Breeden can authorize.
Bob, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I had a question. I heard 2 potential topics for a special meeting. One was to complete the community engagement plan, which I think is a good idea to complete it. The other was to discuss the fee proposal. And I just want to be clear that the board hasn't tasked the PAC with coming up with a unified recommendation regarding that proposal on the 5th. We're having a workshop at which time the PAC and the TAC and the board will have discussions about the elements of that proposal. We have not asked the PAC to come up with a recommendation regarding the fee at this point.
Okay, I was just suggesting that as a result of the discussions held today, to give the TAC and the PAC more opportunity to present their ideas, more than just the 3 to 5 minute public comment time. And you said you were going to allow us a little more time to discuss it. And I think it would be better for our members to talk about it before we come to that meeting.
Well, I think you may have misunderstood what Supervisor Gleason had recommended, which is that at the actual workshop, rather than staff's recommendation in the staff report, that you be treated just like a member of the public and have the same time limitations. That's not what his recommendation was. His recommendation was to seek input from the general public at that workshop, then have a period of time at the workshop at which the PAC and the TAC would discuss that, any of that public input and your own individual thoughts on the fee during the workshop. And then the workshop would end with the board discussing everything it had heard from the public, from the PAC and the TAC, and potentially provide direction to the staff on how to move forward towards adoption of a fee. So all I'm saying is that you haven't specifically been tasked with anything regarding the fee at this point. I understand you want to think about it. We're going to make sure the information is out there at least a week ahead of the workshop so people can evaluate it. But at this point, we haven't asked the PAC to make a recommendation prior to that workshop.
All right, then, as I understand it, then we just address it at the April 5th meeting as individuals.
Right, it's a workshop. Just like the board's not going to come into that workshop with having made a decision about what it thinks should happen. It's a opportunity to hear from the public, for the board to hear from its advisory committees, and for the board to discuss amongst themselves in terms of whether they think the staff recommendation is going down the right path.
So I guess what we're saying is we are approving the fact that you are going to just not meet. You are going to move your meeting. We are not directing you to do anything at the meeting. Is that correct, staff?
Except finalize the plan.
What you would do and bring back to us for our next meeting.
They would just find another day to conduct the regular meeting.
Right. That's all. Okay. All right. So we will a motion to, have we done that yet? Receive and file.
No.
Motion.
Motion to receive and file.
Second.
Director Harrington.
Aye.
Chairwoman Breeden.
Aye.
Vice Chair Brown.
Aye.
Director Page.
Aye.
Okay, so the next item is the general manager's report.
I have none at this time.
All right, closing comments from the board.
Supervisor Kingsley sends his regrets that he couldn't make today's meeting.
Okay, thank you. Peter?
No.
Okay, I have none. Okay, the next meeting will be April 19th. We hope to see you all there. Thank you very much, and encourage people to let others know about the meeting on the 5th so we can get as many comments as we can. Thank you. Adjourn the meeting.